All right, welcome back to the Beyond Coaching podcast. Today we've got Scott Gunter, owner of District Strength and Power in East Hanover, New Jersey. Scott blends sports medicine, and strength conditioning, coaches everyone from youth to pros, and built a 2,000 square foot facility that delivers individualized programming with a team vibe. Today we're going to dig into niche sports success, client experience that drives retention, and how to keep coaches fulfilled. And we're also going to dig into some of the business lessons he's learned behind the growth as well. So we're super excited today. Scott, how are we doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. So give us a snapshot of where District Strength and Power is at today. What's your athlete mix? What do you guys focus on?
So we do both have general population and athletes, like you said, every age level ranging from youth up to pro and national team, and probably 70% athletes, 30% general population. But we tend to focus on clients who want maybe admin type training, have a very competitive mindset, want similar athletic type training and functional exercises. We don't have your basic machines, and it's mostly a functional training gym designed as a scaled down version of what our athletes see at the pro and college levels. So yeah, our goal is take our youth athletes and really just get them involved in the gym, get them to enjoy what they're doing and create an affinity for training, have them meet some of the older people and see what the next stage is for them, take these high school athletes and get them prepped for what they're going to see at the collegiate levels. And then college athletes, if they are looking to take it to that next level, start to introduce some other things as far as the recovery systems, movements, even working on psychology and things that would take them to that next level and build a team around them.
I love it. I know you mentioned you've always wanted a gym. What broke you out of someday to let's open this thing?
Well, I always say this, if you keep looking at yourself every morning and tell yourself you're a dinosaur, eventually you're going to wake up and believe you are one. So I kept telling my friends, I'm going to own a gym. I'm going to own a gym. And then you start to, I use this kind of stair analogy where if you look at this huge cliff and on the top of the cliff, that's what you want to achieve. And for me, I put owning a gym at the top of that cliff. For a long time, I was standing at the bottom, looking at the top and saying, I want to get up there. I'm going to get up there someday. And you just keep like looking at it for a long period of time. And eventually you start to get some pieces together and say, okay, I'm ready to take action. And the first step was taking that huge cliff and turning it, instead of a huge cliff that I need to climb, turning it into a staircase, taking that top one, moving back one and saying, if I want to own a gym, what is the thing that I need right before that, before I take that step and open a gym? Okay, if I need, say, startup capital and clients, what do I need right before that in order to get that? And you just keep tracing these stairs back until you see that staircase is exactly where you're standing and you take that next step.
That's good. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, they don't have that mentality. Like, it seems like a lot of people get into this and they look at it as like, they see the end goal. Like, they look at like someone like Zach, who's got a majorly successful gym. And the assumption is like, well, that's a giant thing to get to. I can't get to that level. Instead of like what you're talking about, where it's like what's the smallest step thing I can do now? Like, what's the littlest piece I can do now to get next step? Or kind of like we were saying, like, what's the step before having that final success to get there? Did that kind of mentality come from anywhere? Like, or did you?
Yeah, several places. So I would say that's also something we put into the way we coach our clients on nutrition. A lot of them say they want washboard abs, or they want to, or say it's a vertical jump, whatever your goal is. That if they're just focusing on that end goal and not focusing on the habits that lead to that goal, their chances are they're not going to get that, or they're always going to be measuring themselves currently in relation to that goal. And they say, well, I don't have washboard abs today, therefore I'm a failure, as opposed to I accomplished or did this habit that if I keep stringing this habit together for 6 months will lead to washboard abs. And then I did this habit today, that's success. That is generally how we get better results as far as the change psychology of coaching. But I didn't always have that mindset. I grew up in a town where nobody drove nice cars. Nobody had parents who were doctors or lawyers. And even our valedictorian who got a perfect score on the SAT couldn't get into Ivy League school. And we were not really taught to be very ambitious. I remember my sister went to her guidance counselor, and even my friend's sister went to a guidance counselor, and she said she wanted to be an engineer, and they said, "Oh, you're not going to do that. That's male-dominated fields. Why don't you work on something else?" And she ended up going and becoming a successful entrepreneur. Successful engineer. I didn't really get this mindset until I went to my college. I went to Quinnipiac University and happened to be around some people from different backgrounds, be around certain people who had connections in certain places, but also different mentalities. And there's a book that I have not read yet, but I do want to, and it's called Rich Dad Poor Dad. And it talks a little bit about thinking differently from that perspective, possibly thinking differently about finances and success. And I had an opportunity to talk to people from all walks of life, and then also meet Coach Brishesh Patel, the strength coach of Quinnipiac, hockey and basketball. And when you start to see people that are in places that you want to be, and instead of looking at them as up high on this pedestal and starting to bring them into your circles, you start to believe things are a little bit more true. Also the book, Think and Grow Rich. There's a lot in there that's just seems very straightforward and basic, but they're actually putting a spotlight on things that we take for granted every day. Like if you want to achieve something, you have to actually believe it and will it into fruition. And then you have to surround yourself by a mastermind group of other people who are maybe achieving a little bit more than you, maybe a little less than you, and you're constantly pushing each other. And then there's just the mantra of you are the sum of your 5 best friends. And you start to look at the people in your life and associate with, hang out with, talk to people who own other businesses. I didn't just look at gyms. I looked at people who were entrepreneurs in other areas. One of my close friends owns a fencing club, and he did it a few years before I opened, and I got to learn from his mistakes. But then you just read books. I read seminars through All in Cosgrove. I went to different seminars and summits, and you just keep doing these little things that fuel you along the way, just like a client with their goals. Instead of making it this long, drawn out process, even if it's periodized coaching, you build in mini goals or mini achievements along the way. And it's just like a video game. You get to that check mark and you move on from there. That's now your new floor.
Yeah, I think you hit something there that was really solid, and something I did was when I was growing my gym, I realized that I got into a size that not a lot of people had reached. And so I had to start looking for mentors or at least peers in other businesses that were larger in different industries. I took a lot from manufacturing, from other service industries, from software companies, things like that, because there's a lot of things that are agnostic to the type of business that are just business principles. I think a lot of times as fitness entrepreneurs, we sort of look in the same circles and we get the same information, but we're not actually looking into like what's working for larger businesses that can actually help us scale. So I think that's huge. Surrounding yourself with like-minded folks, people growing, I think is really important. It makes us dream big. It's nice for our ego to be the big fish in the small pond, but it doesn't really help with our growth and our knowledge gain. So that's
Absolutely
a huge one.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a time, like, I think there's also a problem where people can get like sort of stuck in a certain way of thinking where it's like, let's say you come from a space where if I make $5,000 a month, that's like major success. And so you can't wrap your mind around the next milestone is just a giant number. Yeah. But if you have this focus of like just what is the next thing we can do to get another client or to grow better or to improve a process. There's an interesting thing is like Facebook capped out at like 90 million users at one point in time. And they like got stuck there. And it was really this question of like, is that it? And you could look at that and be like, that's it. I mean, that's massive success, this unparalleled success. And then obviously they people came in and they created a better system and then they grew to billions and billions of users. And so it's this idea that like everything that's in front of you is a potentially solvable problem. It's just a matter of either having the information to solve the problem or executing the process to do it. It opens up this sort of thinking that can be like, if you are, like you described, very process oriented problem solver, everything that gets in front of you is just what's the next most important thing to do? What's the next problem to solve? What's the solution to do it? And if you can come up with 5 solutions, you'll always, just keep trying different things. Do you feel like in that early stage, there anything notable about like a particular problem that you found to be like, you thought was insurmountable, but now you're like, hey, we just found a solution to that and did it?
I think with everyone, there's going to be different phases of your career and different phases of your business. I remember, I started as an independent contractor out of another facility. And at that point, I was also working another job. As an athletic trainer, I was serving as the physician extender to an NFL doctor in office 2 days a week, working a crazy schedule, sometimes 60 patients a day. And my first initial goal was, let me get enough clients that I can now do this full time. But I also wanted to get enough clients where I can do that full time, but not have to worry about, say, trying to get as many people as possible, lowering the value of the product just to get quantity over quality. I wanted to be comfortable enough to make that jump where you go through a period of time where maybe you're you're making a little bit less because you leave this job, but then you want an effective trade-off. So initially that was the goal, made that step, and then eventually opened the gym here with my business partner. And at first we're working with most of our clients. My business partner, Dan, did have a few coaches working with him as well. So we did have some of that coming in, but the initial focus is, okay, can we pay rent here, pay utilities, and still pay ourselves? And that's your floor initially. That's the minimum that you have to do. And then eventually you get to a point where you do the math. We set this up where we have 3 double half racks here. And I explained almost like a barbershop type mentality, where if we have these 3 double half racks, we have 6 stations where 6 independent workouts could go on at one time. And we could bump that up to 8 if we need to with the turf space and everything else. We start to do the math and say, okay, if we hit this number, then it costs us this per square foot to operate. This is our break even. And if we hit this number, we're now paying our rent fully with the other coaches. And now all the sessions that I do can pay me directly. And then that becomes your new floor. And you set another goal where it's like, okay, now let's pay our utilities. Okay, now let's pay ourselves from these other coaches. And just like you said, when you make your first, say, 10 grand a month, and initially that looked like something that was insurmountable, I had to do a lot of work to reframe my mindset. I started my very first job ever at age 13. I was working at a bus as a busboy for $2 an hour. So I know what that was like. And then I had to reframe my mind. Got my first job as an athletic trainer. Also didn't have a high salary there. But each time you move up to a different tier, that kind of reframes your focus and you can see that next level a little bit better. But as far as different problems that we had to solve, it was always a focus of, let's put quality first. Let's constantly work on several aspects of the facility. So the client experience, the coach experience. So working on continuing education for our coaches and prioritizing their well-being and making sure that they are constant learners throughout the growth of their career, focusing on even the quality of athletes that we have coming in. So some of that is branding. I mean, if someone is not born into a D1 body, that you can't necessarily always bring them to the professional level. But if we brand and bring coaching certifications and make the facility look a little more like what they're expecting at that D1 level, then chances are the people coming through the pipeline are going to start at a little higher place. And then we have a little bit more to work with. And then just kept focusing on processes and quality first, as opposed to just trying to get things in the door. And then I talked with Zach last time. We really haven't spent much in marketing aside from just a little bit of giving back to the community, sponsoring booster clubs and just doing stuff like that. Aside from it, it's been mostly word of mouth, mostly people seeing social media and maybe hearing about the athletes we have in here and then following, and then maybe coming from another facility, seeing just firsthand us doing things a little bit differently, communicating with them in a different way. And then they tell somebody else and say, hey, this is different. You should come check this out.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Another thing you mentioned too was how you kind of stumbled into this fencing ecosystem in sports performance.
Yeah.
I know you didn't open the gym thinking I'm going to be this fencing training facility, but how did that come about?
That was just very early in my career. I came out into the industry fired up, ambitious. Like I just graduated and it's like, okay, I just spent years of my life working, especially athletic training. We do a lot of free work and clinicals where it's 500 hours plus your classes and it's just free. You're doing all the manual labor. You graduate and now all of a sudden you're getting paid to do what you want. That's awesome. I was ambitious. And then I sprinted to get these certifications. First thing I did when I graduated was just find a list of the top 100 people in the fitness performance space, strength and conditioning space, and follow every single one of them and start to go through the list and see who I gravitated towards, who spoke to me, who was maybe in a couple different related fields, and then try to learn from them, see what certifications they had at maybe the NFL or pro levels of different sports and start to pursue those. I started to try and say, I always had this idea where I wanted to either work in the pros or work with pros. So I said, how can I make myself more marketable to that? And part of that was also getting myself working with better athletes. So I was working out of another facility, just kind of a franchise-based place, and I was building my own client base there too. And I actually had a friend who I went to high school with who happened to be a fencer. We knew her as the girl who was never in school and was taller than everybody else, and it was almost not graduating because of how many times she was competing overseas and traveling. And I just reconnected, and turned out she was pretty highly ranked in the country. I believe maybe top 14, top 16 or so in the country, and started to just ask her if she was doing anything from a fitness standpoint. She worked out a little bit on her own. I started to learn more about what they actually do at these fencing clubs, and it was very traditional based. Max, I know you have experience training in many other countries with weightlifting, and I'm sure you've seen a couple different things there with fencing. It's very Polish and Russian descent, and it's a lot of just yelling, bodyweight stuff, crunches, sit-ups, pull-ups, jumping over a fencing saber, and really just you fence to get better at fencing. There wasn't a performance component. There wasn't a strength and conditioning component. They had some plyometric work as well and some things you were seeing out of other countries. But in the US, at least, they weren't really doing anything. So I saw that as an opportunity to say, hey, this is something not a lot of people are doing. This is an Olympic track sport. So let's see what we can do here. And we started to introduce strength and conditioning concepts. Right away when she came in, she had a quad that was maybe 3 times the size of the other one, just because you're lunging on one side versus another. She had knee and meniscus issues, patella tendon issues, Achilles issues on the back leg, lower back pain, and a whole bunch of things that I could take the sports medicine component, work into her programs, and try to balance some things out as much as possible. And we started putting out videos talking about the training. We started to, I wrote a few articles, and through her, I met some other people. She eventually moved up the ranks and made it to top 4 in the country. She introduced me to somebody else. So top 4 that made the Olympic team for Rio. She introduced me to somebody else who was on track to do the Olympic team, and I started training her. And then she introduced me to the friend I mentioned who now owns a fencing club. He was a top level fencer as well. Before coming to me, had an Oates procedure. Had cartilage damage in the knee. They had to fully take a piece of cartilage from somewhere else, plug it, and then get him back. We did his rehab at my facility, and then, at the facility I was training at, and then I did his performance training or return to play program. He came back and got a gold in the Pan American Games, but then decided to open a fencing club. It was either for him, it was either go Olympic track or open a fencing club. He decided to open the fencing club, and he's now a coach for the Olympic team. With the other 2, they ended up going to the Olympics in Rio and brought back a bronze medal from there. Following that, because it's such a small niche market, especially focused in New York, New Jersey, and then some in California, people start coming out of the woodworks. But it's a very individual sport where parents would call and they'd say, hey, I hear you train with this person. What can I do to get my daughter in with you? And don't tell anybody else I'm training with you, because we want that advantage and don't want to share that with anybody else. But yeah, I started to build a network with that, but I never wanted to pigeonhole in that one sport. I was very interested in all the other sports, had some background experiences in football, hockey, soccer, and want to continue to keep those options open, but we still actually train a big population of fencers here.
Nice.
What's interesting to me, and Max and I have actually even talked about this with our app Coach Logic, is like when you build a business, you have this idea of who you're going to serve, and then all of a sudden, like, customers appear that you didn't maybe anticipate that you were going to. Yeah, and you pivot, and I recommend, just like you did to people listening to this, lean into that. So like, let the market tell you what direction you should go, and like lean in hard and do whatever you can to, if you have momentum in a certain sector or area, just go for it. I love that you guys were able to do that with fencing.
Yeah, and we do see that a lot in our industry, where a coach he's like, my way or the highway. I want my music playing. I want to only work with this population, and if you're not that, then wrong. But yeah, I mean, we're in a area right now where we have some pretty good athletes in the area, but probably the biggest population for this area right now is lacrosse. One of our coaches ended up making a connection with a high-level lacrosse, female lacrosse athlete who's national team professional on their new professional league, and they just started coming out of the woodwork after she started training here. So that was something that maybe we didn't anticipate initially, and I myself didn't have a lot of experience in lacrosse. So this coach, we had leaned heavily into that population. Now we have a huge women's lacrosse population, and now even some of the male pro athletes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think a lot of times people get into this space, like especially in the training space, and probably even more so where like I'm involved in Zach in this like powerlifting and weightlifting, where it's like they establish a worldview of how things are going to be, and they can't deviate from that. And like, I remember the first time we ran a competition in the Bay Area and we charged $55 to enter. And we got so much hate mail, like emails to be like, it used to be $10 and what the hell is this? And now it's, no one bats an eye at $85 or $100. Powerlifting meets are $150. This is pretty common in a lot of areas, $125. And it's like, if you just hold on to that worldview, or you hold on to anything, like, this is the business, we charge people X amount of money. I need 500 people to break even. That's the way it is. I can't do anything else. And you might get someone knock on the door and be like, oh yeah, I don't mind paying $500 for a membership to get personalized, blah, 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 or I don't mind this. And you kind of like think of that as a fluke instead of, hey, that might be the way to go. The pivot is to move into that thing. Or like you, like fencing, like, well, I'm not a fencing coach, so I don't deal with it, even though there's like a market of people that are looking for that help. It's hard to break out of that. And I think a lot of times you run into people who are stuck in business because they've just never changed their mentality around, like, they're incapable of making the pivot because they've just decided this is the way it is. It has to be this way because that's what I thought it was when I started. And I can't even wrap my mind around what the next thing to do is. So it's cool to hear that you, like, you just found this niche and like, hey, this is like something I can do, and I can offer my services in a whole market that's underserved and probably like woefully so in your case, where it's like, I can really help these people get to the next level. That's super cool.
Oh yeah, I'm a big believer in just saying yes to things and figuring out the how later.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love it.
If you're offered a job where you need a hammer and you don't have a hammer, say yes, go find a hammer.
There you go. You mentioned you in business, you study companies like Zappos and Chewy. What have you stole from their client experience playbook that allowed you to grow District?
So more from those two specific companies were more about customer service. So we talked last time where there's a story that I think I even heard about this through an Alwyn Cosgrove seminar, but CEO or a leader of the company was out with friends, potential clients, prospects. And one of them happens to mention in passing that he's kill for a pizza right now. So he hands him his phone or says, pull out your phone and I want you to call my company. Call Zappos. They go, why am I going to call Zappos to order a pizza? It's a shoe company. He goes, just call them, but call from your phone so they know it's not coming from me. So he calls up and he's joking. He's like, hey, I'd like to order a pizza. And instead of them saying, sorry, this is Zappos, it's a shoe company, they said, maybe just so you know, this is a shoe company, but I see you're calling from this area. Would you like me to look up the 5 nearest pizza places? I think they even said, these are the 5 nearest pizza places available. These are open. This one has good reviews. Would you like me to place the order for you? And now, did they sell a pair of shoes that night? Probably not. But that story has been told by me, and I'm sure multiple people. That guy, I bet they got a lot of new clients. And the next time that person is needing shoes, Zappos is going to be top of mind for them. With Chewy, it was a similar concept where if you are a subscriber of Chewy and you're getting pet food delivered every month, eventually, if your dog passes away, which is inevitable, that next order comes next month, because the first thing you do when your dog passes is not cancel your food subscriptions, it's mourn. So you get that in the mail the next month, and then you inevitably call up and say, sorry, my dog passed, I no longer need the subscription. Instead of them saying, okay, send it back and here's a refund, they say, you know what, you hang on to it, give it to someone in need around you, maybe donate it to a local animal shelter, and keep the here's a refund, keep the money, everything like that. And then maybe several days later, they send flowers in the mail. So again, inevitably, you get a new dog and you go to Chewy and you're remembering this experience that you had for them. And what you're doing is addressing repeatable moments. So Chewy looked at this as every single one of our customers at some point will experience this. How can we look at this repeatable moment, get ahead of it, and have an action plan for it? So we try to look at things like that from the client perspective, from the customer service perspective, and say, how can we look for these repeatable moments? What are some things that occur? How can we address them? Even if it's something that maybe is a conflict or a complaint from a client. If you have enough business, at some point you might have a complaint. So I think those are good opportunities to showcase your customer service, show that you want to do better for the client, and have that client come out from that complaint situation with a better understanding, with a good experience that is superseding them just going without that experience.
Sounds a lot like the idea of like never sacrifice the customer for the sale. Like, it's so easy to live in a world where it's like, well, I'm going to fight for the $10 this guy paid me, or the $100, whatever. But the customer is worth a million times more. Like, you'd rather have a customer. I just had a call with a lady the other day who was asking about like some app, some powerlifting thing. And I was like, I don't think that this thing what you're looking for is the option I can sell you. Like, you already know what you're doing. You're coaching yourself. Like, the solution I have isn't what you want. And like, sometimes you have to do that. But if you just stay to that, true to that, which is like trying to serve your customer as best you possibly can, whether they pay you money, whether they buy anything from you, you're always going to have this reputation of really quality customer service. Is there anything you guys do that you would say, like, head and shoulders, you think you're above everyone else in that area? Like, do you have your own pizza delivery story?
We actually give pizza to all of our clients as they leave. No,
A solid move.
it's hard to say to put on the spot like that. I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Well, I guess my question for you would be, how do you deliver an exceptional client experience outside of delivering exceptional training? How do you train your staff to do these kind of things?
So it comes down to it is mostly a individual or one-on-one based training service. Most of what we're doing is private training, personal training, and we work with our coaches to kind of get a 360-degree view of that client's life. And what we try to do differently is look at how all these different systems affect what that client is doing in that individual workout, whether that's today or how they're recovering, how they might be injury prone, how they might perform on the field. So we try to take a snapshot by even just subjective readiness questionnaires or just talking to that client about how they're doing, seeing what's going on in their life outside of training, so we know what kind of battery we have to work with, what might be affecting them, what might be taking away some of their neural output. And then if there's anything that we could do to improve that. I think, well, there is an entirely separate field of sports psychology. We do offer a lot of those type of conversations. We've had several clients leave and say, like, hey, this is therapy. This literally feels like therapy. I feel better leaving here, and we want to create that positive environment. So we do create a space for them to open up about things outside of the gym, outside of the sport, and kind of help create those connections with them where they can see how that maybe relates to their performance. If they're somebody who has to make a game-winning field goal and they just experienced a breakup or lost their dog and are waiting for flowers from Chewy in the mail, that's something that will actually impact them and be on their mind. So we talk about the nervous system a little bit. We talk about how all these different inputs to your nervous system influence your outputs. So whether that's sight, where you can taste, smell, feel, we kind of talk about how all of those inputs either upregulate your nervous system or downregulate it and can affect your output, and then give them the tools to recognize where they are and have certain strategies to drive themselves up into that performance zone if they need to, or bring themselves down into a more controllable performance zone if they need to. We do other things. Like after a training session, when we want them to go in and recover, we're giving them cold eucalyptus towels and having them focus on breathing exercises and more maybe flow-based movements that help drive their nervous system down, but not just saying, hey, you're on the ground stretching, saying, this is why we're doing this. This is why this is eucalyptus scented, because that is a sensory input that is actually down-regulating your nervous system and helping you go into more of a recovery zone after. And if you have a little bit better control over this, you can dial up your performance when you need to, and you can go into that recovery zone when you want to.
Nice.
I love that. I love that. So one of the things you mentioned too is like mistakes. Maybe it's not really a mistake. You know, I believe you mentioned to me you plan to, or you're prone to over planning and like under executing certain things. How have you reworked that to increase success for you guys?
Well, I partner with my business partner, Dan, and he likes to just pull the trigger right away. So
There you go.
so we, like I said, we balance each other out with that, and we always discuss either big purchases, whether it's budgeting, and he's sending me something on Facebook Marketplace, like, do we need this new treadmill? And then we talk about things and coordinate and look at, okay, a needs analysis. How will this serve the community? How will this improve it? And then we also create some more like a layout for the year and say, these are our goals for the year. This is what we want to achieve in that year. These are some options of how to achieve that. How do we prioritize that? And then we're also willing to pivot with that too. So even when we saw the lacrosse community start to develop a little bit, we started to pivot away to some equipment that might serve that community a little bit more, and adjust a little bit to something that maybe listening to the feedback of the clients or the athletes, where we're focusing on different priority. And we do try to get feedback from the clients. I just had a discussion with one of mine the other day who works as a high-level executive for basically running these big events. And he looks at everything. He goes to a concert, he's looking at the lighting guy, the ushers, how everything's coordinated, the timing of everything, the set changes. And he's just a great person to talk to and bounce ideas off of from that. So he gives very good feedback as far as what you get from the service industry, whether that's from Michelin star restaurants, 5-star hotels, and how they're treating clients. We try to bring that into this atmosphere as well.
Right.
I love that. I love that. So as far as talking about the next stages of growth for you guys, what is winning look like in the next 3 years for you?
Well, again, it's hard because you start with this goal of owning a gym and then you raise that next goal. And if I were to look at what I'm doing right now, several years ago, I would have said, okay, you're good. And that is success. I'm at a point where you are kind of reshaping that and saying, okay, what's next? How can we serve the population better? And whether that's, there's definitely a couple options. That might be a larger space, so we have larger turf that we can serve the lacrosse population a little bit better, and potentially partner with them, work in certain areas where we can do slightly larger groups, but for specific populations that are still focused without watering down the product. The model that we have is working right now as well, where it's a 2,000 square foot facility. We get packed at times. The energy is really good and the margins are still there, but obviously expenses are increasing. Constantly revamp and look at potential price increases and stuff like that. But we could either go the route of a larger facility or open another unit the same size as this. Now, the other thing was I never wanted to open a unit like this in different towns, especially in sports performance, just because for me and what we see in the industry is if you just have a bunch of those different areas, it becomes you're going to that place and it's one of three. The coaching is only as good as the coaches that are there. And you're also taking clients that are coming from all those areas and now spreading them out and spreading them thin. Whereas I've always believed if you build the best product, you're going to have people who are willing to travel farther. And I wanted to make this kind of the hotspot for that. And we have people traveling we're in East Hanover, about maybe 40 minutes from the city. And we do have some people coming from Manhattan. Now, I think we could expand a little bit, but there in the business park that we're in, there are other units like this. We could potentially get another one of those, build out the same model and then scale effectively, as opposed to, I've been warned against going for a super large facility and just skipping steps along the way. Because then if you take our population, throw that in a 50,000 square foot facility, it now looks like your business is dead and it's very empty. And then you're also trying to cover rent. So possibly just looking at what is one stair up from us, whether that's lateral and getting a new facility, or lateral the other direction and replicating this within our same business park, and now creating kind of this compound where this is still the place to be, the place to train, but you're still getting that individualized control, or we can still take a hands-on approach on running the business.
I love it. Yeah, it's
and
always
also
that.
potentially doing some online work and coaching as well. But I want to, we're working on several systems that will allow us to deliver that effectively.
Yeah,
Nice.
and there's a software called Coach Logic that does it really well. So
I hear that's pretty good.
I'll drop a trial link for you. Don't worry. As we wrap up here, what's one piece of advice that you give your coaches to develop their career?
I would say never stop learning and enjoy what you do. I mean, we do try to prioritize creating an environment. Even the people that we hire, we kind of have this mini trial period where we say, do they fit with our team? Do they add to the environment? Do they work in an environment where it's not this training session happening in isolation of this one and this one? Are we galvanized and stronger as a group and building the atmosphere together? So we do try to prioritize coaches with that personality. We talk about certain things in the interview process that let us know whether these coaches have similar values and align with our core values. And one of those is a continued learning experience, where whether that's in a specific area like soccer, like lacrosse, or even just getting better at coaching or learning psychology, we want to try to push for coaches who value that, do that on their own, and want to bring more to the table. And then when someone does, we want to support that and showcase that, have them teach the other coaches. So I think we talked about this, but for employees to feel fulfilled in their work, they generally need three things. So that's going to be one, a connection between effort and reward. So if our coaches take on more clients, more sessions, they're making more money, and we're trying to work on additional incentives where they do more, bring more to the table, bring more educational resources. We can provide more for them as well and give them additional opportunities. It's going to be some autonomy, so ability to either create their own schedules, do their own programming within our skeleton structure and our starting points that we've worked with to create these systems. Even though if a coach comes in and says, hey, I saw this research and it really shows we should be doing this, we evaluate it as a team and then try to roll that out as a team going forward. And then the last one is complexity. So I never want it to be a gym that's just having trainers make up workouts on the spot or doing a workout of the day, where maybe in some situations that's effective, maybe in group settings. I want it to be different by giving these individualized programs, have these end goals, have specific phases that we're progressing through and goals within those phases. So we want a lot of thought behind what's going into it. And I tell the clients, I tell the coaches, there needs to be a why behind everything you're doing. At any point in time, the client, the parent should be able to come to you and say, why are we doing this exercise for this many reps in this order? And there should be an answer for that. So all of those things we're trying to work in, and keeping a positive environment, keeping in a curious environment where you're always curious about your client and looking to further that relationship.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, I appreciate you being on, Scott. Thanks for all the valuable information, man. I
Absolutely.
think it's
Thanks
been
for
a
having me.
banger of an episode. Yeah. Sweet.
Love it.